Praise the Lord. Welcome to another Mindsets video. I'm Dr. Neil Jepson, and today I want to talk about something that kind of tying into a previous video where I talked about beginning with the end in mind. This is more about the vision for the journey. When we talked about last time, counting the cost and understanding what it's going to take for you to follow that path, and being willing to give that or go through that. And but I want to talk about now about sort of keeping the vision. When we look at the total journey, right? We're at a point in time and we're at a place. If you in the old days, you used to before they had GPS. We used to, there was MapQuest, right? Before that, I used to travel around. There wasn't even MapQuest, but I remember driving across the country a few times, and I would look things up on MapQuest, and I would print it out, or I would have an atlas, and from state to state, I would take a highlighter and trace my path that I wanted to follow, my route, and that's sort of having the telescope view, right? Even nowadays, when you use GPS, it'll show you the total route that you're going to follow, the whole picture. But then that's what I call having the telescope view, seeing the big picture. There's a place I'm at now, and there's a place I want to get to. And if you're thinking about or are in the midst of your recovery, there's a place you're at now or a place you were, and you're trying to get to another place. So we have to have we have to start with that. We have to know where we're trying to go. Now, that's called the telescope view. And if you've watched some of the previous videos where I've talked about the limbic system does not have a telescope view. That's really using our whole mind. We have to think the bigger picture. And when we look at something from a wide angle, from a wide lens like that, when we look at the whole journey, I'll continue using my analogy of driving across the country. I could imagine what the road was going to look like. I could imagine, maybe even I saw pictures of the places I was going to that I hadn't been to yet. But I didn't. I only thought that was there. I hadn't been there yet. Does that make sense? I could imagine what that city was going to look like, or I could imagine what that highway, and maybe I even could look up and find some pictures to give me a sense of what that's going to look like. But that could have been totally false, right? That could have been me being told a lie. But I believed that was true. If I followed this path, I was going to get to where I wanted to go. It was going to look like what I thought it was going to look like. And we need to keep a hold of that, because you've got to keep that destination in mind as you now begin your journey. But once you begin your journey, you also need what I call the microscope view. So there's a telescope and a microscope. And because the microscope is focusing on the next step. You won't get very far if you don't take the next step. You can dream about where you want to go. I drove, when I grew up in Vermont, I ended up living in San Diego. I drove from Vermont to San Diego, from San Diego to Vermont a number of times. And but if I didn't get up and go out and get in, walk down my steps to my driveway and walk to my car and get in the car, I wasn't going to get anywhere, right? I had at least just those steps. And if I didn't get on the highway and get on the right highway, right, which I can determine by looking from the telescope. But now I need to pay attention to where I'm going right now, and I need to pay attention to the next turn and the next step and the next mile and the next whatever it is, right? So we need a microscope to know that we're taking the next step and to pay attention. And when you're walking, right, now moving from driving to walking, you have to pay really close attention, right? You have to pay some attention to how you're walking, because there might be something for you to stumble over. And you may not have seen that from the telescope view, right? If you've ever done any hiking, you can look at the trail map, right? That's a telescope view of where you're going to go. But it doesn't tell you about that that rock that's in the trail, or the tree root that runs across the trail you're going to hike on that you might trip over and fall on your face. Not that I've ever done that, that you know about, but you've got to watch where you're going. You have to pay attention to the next step. So you need the telescope and you need the microscope. And of course, there's a commitment to action and commitment to continuing on that path. And so that's why I said before, you got to begin with the end in mind and know what's going to define you on your journey. And you start with that telescope view, because that's going to tell you where you're trying to go. And then along the way, hey, you may need to make some adjustments. That's the part of the microscope view as well. You may see, hey, you get to a place you ever been driving, you didn't know. I know GPS a lot of times now will tell us that there's some road construction. This just happened just last night. We were headed to an event with my pastor and some other men from our church. We were headed to an event, and we got going down the highway, and there was some construction, and everything slowed way up. Well, we didn't know that, and once we got there, now if we'd have known, we could have. And I've gotten to this area before where they had construction, and I've gotten off and driven on the side, gotten off the freeway or the interstate and driven on the highway and kind of taken the back roads to get to the, get around some of that construction. Would have loved to know. I would have loved to have the telescope view to tell me that, or maybe even just the microscope. You make an adjustment sometimes. You get someplace and the road thought you were headed down doesn't end up looking the way you thought it was going to, and you need to make some adjustments. Maybe things aren't going the way you thought they were going to go. And in recovery, that's going to happen as well. You're going to be working along and you're going to be like, I'm not getting the results I want, or I'm not having the success I desire. So you need to now, where you're trying to go, but you have to make some adjustments along the way. Wanted to share that bit. I know that's straightforward and obvious, but I think one of the things that when we look at the neurobiology, we've got to understand that, this is why I try to explain kind of how our brain works in ways that people, in simple ways that we can understand. We can have the telescope view and the microscope view go back and watch some of these videos. I'm not going to go through it all again. When our whole brain is working, but there are situations where we flip our lid, right? The prefrontal cortex I've talked about before, that gets shut down in the limbic system, which in biblical terms is our heart or our flesh, and it's wicked. Okay, it's not going to lead us anywhere good. It's just going to lead us to seek immediate gratification, or immediate pain relief, or immediate reduction in our fear, and it only has the microscope view. It doesn't care what the consequences are, and so we need our whole mind turned on. So if we can establish that ahead of time, we can recognize, that we may be in a place where our emotions or our desires or our habits or whatever has kicked in, our limbic system, our heart has kicked in, our wicked heart has kicked in, and it's trying to take over, and we can say, no, I don't want to go. I know where that leads me, and I need to course correct because I got the telescopic view. I got the view that God has for my life, and that's not the path of righteousness. My limbic system is not going to lead me down a path of righteousness, and I'm going to choose that today. God bless you. I hope that it was helpful to you, and I hope that blessed somebody, and we'll see you in the next Mindset video.